Nice to see you, Cole.
New shirt. All right. A black and white shirt. Well, it's brown and white, but
Well,
close
it's
enough.
actually blue and it's got like rust color in it, but yeah, I figured I'm tired of that leather shirt. I really
Hey,
am.
we didn't do a new background. I got to get a new background.
Oh,
Jeez.
we could do a new background on the fly, maybe. Could we
These are
do that?
virtual.
Because we are so technically savvy. There we go.
Yeah.
I don't like
There
this one
we
because it leaves that little trail behind me, but if I sit really still, that's really hard for me, though. I can't sit still. It's just
go.
like asking me not to talk. Not gonna happen.
Quit being so tall, John.
But yeah, but I'm really
It
good
really,
at being tall.
really irritates me when you do that.
You know what? The reason I'm comfortable with my tallness is you told me that I do tall really well.
You do it very
That's
well.
about the only thing I do well, is I think is what you said, actually. And that kind of hurt. At first, it felt like a compliment, and then after it was like that was not.
Yeah. Then you had to think about it, and that hurt. um, so here's one for you. If you could spend an afternoon with a photographer, living or dead, anyone,
Mm,
who would it be?
mm. I can't be you because that'd be like a waste of time. That's
That color guy,
the color guy.
the big color guy with the big images. What's his name?
Oh,
Flash, hot lighting.
oh, Peter Lick.
Peter Lick. That's who
No,
you.
no, 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 it would not be Peter Lick. The one that, early on, one of my influences and a book that I got right away was Art Wolf. I think he's a pretty brilliant photographer, and he's done so many different genres that I find his work to be compelling and creative and unique. Although some of it's a lot like I do now, probably had some influence on me, but um, Art Wolf certainly comes to my mind as a color photographer, but as a black and white photographer, I guess I'm going to default to an Ansel Adams. It would be, he's certainly a pioneer, and that was in a previous uh, recording that we did. I mentioned that it was his work that my mother introduced me to with the print and the negative. So it'd certainly be interesting to sit with Ansel and just see what he might have to say, especially talk to him about Photoshop, Lightroom. If he were, say, look what we got now, Ansel, it's really cool. And see if he would respond the way I think he would, which is to say, this is a party. I
Yeah,
think he would have loved all these
I think
tools. It
so.
would it would have just helped him create and honor his vision even more deeply than he could, because I think he was pioneering all sorts of tips and
Oh
tricks
yeah.
in the darkroom.
Polaroid. He really was the voice that launched Polaroid because a lot of people didn't take to it,
Yeah.
but being able to get instant feedback. It was the digital of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's my thought, I guess, on that. How about you? Do you have somebody that you'd love to sit down and have a conversation with for an afternoon?
Oh yeah. Edward Weston.
Uh,
I read early in my life his day books, his journals. He had quite a few journals, but he had thrown them away. I guess as we all do over the years, you think, oh, I don't need that. And he kept a 2 volume set of his time in Mexico. And his day books are just a fascinating peek into a very cool guy.
mm,
Uh, and so many great stories. I love his work, but not nearly as much as I love his philosophies. Like I remember the first time Ansel met him. They were all invited over to a friend's house, and after dinner, Edward Weston sat in a chair in the middle of the room and he went through his images, didn't say a word.
through Ansel's?
I'm sorry, Edward went through his images
Ah,
showing him, and it was the first time Ansel had seen him.
mhm.
And he says he wasn't immediately taken with them. Uh, I forget his exact reaction, but he said he was so impressed with is that Edward Weston didn't seem to need for anyone to like him. They didn't
Mm,
require any explanation. He simply showed them, and that was it. And
interesting.
something about his self confidence. He loved his images, and that was enough.
Wow.
But it's a fascinating read. I try to read that every year to kind of center myself. And as far as photography books and philosophies go, that was the biggest influence in my life.
I guess I didn't, I knew about his day books. I own them and I've not read them. And I know you're upset with that.
No,
That's something I need to
no,
do. I really do.
no.
And this will inspire me to do that, to be reminded again. But I didn't realize that that was only for that very specific period of time, and that we don't have
Yeah,
necessarily some of that. It would have been interesting to have that early work and his early thoughts, and see how
yeah.
he developed over time.
And then his one model, who I forget her name, she's written a book about her time with Ansel. That's also a nice companion piece to get a peek
Was that
into.
about Ansel or Weston?
I keep saying Ansel with Edward Weston,
Okay.
Edward Weston's model. You know, the girl who all the
Yeah, and
news.
I can't remember, but he didn't marry her? Maybe he had an affair with
No,
her?
he
No.
had affairs with many women.
Yeah, that's what I think I remember too. Yeah.
But it's a real fascinating peek into his life and his psyche from a person one removed. So very cool. We have
So
a ghost over there
so
again.
this is the daughter of the one who intruded on our last recording.
Oh, we
You
can't see her. She
you
didn't
escaped.
appear.
You're good. I had another thought too, though. I happen to know this gentleman and I happen to have studied with him, but I really haven't had a chance to sit down and spend an afternoon with him. And that's
This
the
isn't the Bozo the Clown story again, is it?
no, no, hardly. This is Freeman Patterson.
Oh,
And man, Freeman Patterson, he rises way up to mentorship level for me, right? I going over to South Africa in 2004 to be with him and study with him there was amazing. I mean, it was life changing. It was a time of my life when things were not going well, business wise. And matter of fact, they were crashing down. And my wife insisted I still go to be with Freeman because she knew how important he was to me and his writings. And he's a guy, same thing. I love his photography, but his writings to me is where it's at. I've learned so much about my process and paying attention to my process from Freeman Patterson for sure.
hmm.
So anybody else besides Weston that you can think of?
Not really. I mean, if I could spend some time with Ayn Rand,
Oh, that's
that's the
interesting.
fountainhead, because that was another huge influence in my photography. The
Interesting. Talk about
concept that
that for a minute.
well, the whole concept of creating for yourself through your vision what you love, regardless of what's popular or how many people like it. It's just, I got to tell you, those two books were the biggest influence in the direction of my photography. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I'd
what
love
was the main character in Fountainhead? What was his name?
Howard Roark.
That's right, Rourke. Because
Yeah.
I read that book because of you, and you're right. And Howard just he did what he wanted to do.
There's one scene that I just absolutely love. He's doing his own thing, and because he won't conform to this one art critic, he writes for the newspaper, and he just slams Howard at every opportunity, tries to sabotage every deal. And so there happen to both be at an event, and they
Yeah,
both end up in the restroom together.
yeah.
And the man says to him, "Now that we're alone, why don't you tell me what you think of me?" And he goes, "But I don't." And he leaves. Just love that.
That's great. I don't give thought to you. Pretty powerful statement.
Yeah.
Well, on
And
that note,
it's a very that book really is controversial because it's got some things that by today's standards are very, very un-PC, but you've got to look past them. It's a very polarizing book. You either come out of that book
yeah,
hating Ayn Rand in that book or loving her.
I would agree. I found it fascinating. I enjoyed the read. But, so you got off topic a little bit. If there was somebody else about the creative process, it would be Bruce Springsteen for me. I mean, I'm a huge, longtime follower of Bruce, and I think it would be a fascinating discussion to sit down with him for a half a day.
That's a real back east thing, isn't it? I mean, I've never been a Springsteen fan. I do know a few of the songs, but is that kind of a back east thing?
Well, he's obviously internationally known, right? I mean, he's got huge audiences over in Ireland, for instance, and many other countries, Australia. But yes, he's certainly a product of Asbury Park, New Jersey, and he and Southside Johnny and Miami Steve Van Zandt, all out of that area. So yes, I would think there's probably a bigger draw for Bruce in this area. But I've read all the biographies, the autobiography. I like you and I both love music. I just find him a fascinating figure,
So
and
what's
all of
one
his
thought that you take away from Springsteen that has influenced your photography?
Well, it would be very similar to what you have gone through. The thing that Bruce has been is incredibly loyal to his vision. I mean, you hear about the early albums, for instance, of specifically Born to Run, took forever to put that together because he admits now that he was very, very, very anal about everything, probably to a fault. But he knew in his mind what he wanted his work to sound like and the message that he wanted to get through in it. So to me, he's a prolific lyricist.
Hmm.
And, he crafts a vision with his words incredibly well. Um, for me anyways, but more importantly, he knew what he wanted to not only say, but how it was to be delivered, the tempo, the beat, the driving force, the way the drums had to sound, whether there's going to be a saxophone or not a saxophone solo. I mean, that stuff it wasn't happenstance. It was all very, very much created for a purpose. Really
Hmm.
cool stuff. So anyways,
Cool.
we're going to bore people to tears with any more Springsteen talk. But good idea. So hey, folks, subscribe, link, all those things that you're supposed to do. But on this one, let us know who your heroes are, right? Who would you like to spend a half a day with? Is there somebody else? Because we'd love to know about some others as well that we might be able to read about. Cole's not going to go look at their work because he doesn't do that, but I will because I'm much more mature than he is, and I can do things like that.
Okay.
All
I've had,
righty, good to see you again, Cole. And
okay.
change your shirt.
See you next week.
Yeah, or maybe tomorrow.